very much, and hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you today. I've got about 20 minutes to tell you something about the 10th edition of the TOGAF Standard. So I'll do my best. I will try not to blast you with lots of details, but I will give you some handy links at the end of this session about where you can go and find those details if you want. Today, really, what I want to do is just gently stroll through some of the highlights that should be of interest to people who perhaps are familiar with the TOGAF standard already, or if you've absolutely no idea what it is. Hopefully, there'll be something in here for everybody today. So let's crack on and see what I put on my slides. See if I can remember what's on each one before I get there. So the main thing, all right, good presentations always tell you three things, don't they? So the three things to remember today. TOGAF, about the TOGAF Standard, the 10th edition. The main things that are different, we've introduced a modular structure, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment about why that is. We've expanded the content, and we have introduced domain-specific material, which is something that the TOGAF Standard proper has not really had before. And before I continue any further, I should say I'm at home. And if you hear traffic noise, that's because I live near a road, and sometimes very loud motorcycles come roaring past, which would be annoying. Anyway, modular structure. Why have we done that, and why is this a thing that we're talking about with the TOGAF, with the 10th edition? Well, it's because over time, what we want to be able to do is change parts without reissuing the entire standard. And so what we've done is created a modular structure, components. Imagine that. Imagine a world where enterprise architects understand components. It'd be amazing. So that's what we've done with the structure. And the first footings that you'll see of that as we look ahead in the coming months is that you'll see that that also enables us to offer different configurations of credentials. Now, I won't be able to tell you very much about certification today, and I'm sure you're all eager to know. But one of the motivations for breaking up the standard into more modular structure is to enable us to be more creative with credentials across different topics. Another motivation is that we want to make it more obvious to people, especially kind of, drive-by semi-enthusiasts, but make it more obvious that you don't actually have to read every word and use all of it in order to get value from the TOGAF standard. I've only worked for the Open Group for a couple of years, and before that, I was an enterprise architect doing lots of different kinds of work. And I had the same general opinion of the TOGAF standard as I'm sure many of you got, which is there's some good stuff in there, but blimey, you have to get through a lot of material in order to find it. And so the modularization of the standard really is a way of helping people zoom into the bits that are most relevant to the kind of work that they're doing or interest that they have at a point in time. We've expanded the content, and being able to expand it and not publish it all as one great big lump is helpful. But we've expanded the content into a number of, both horizontally and vertically. And the way that we've been able to do that is through the introduction of a new element as part of the standard proper, which we refer to as TOGAF series guides. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. But so the expansion is both, I guess, horizontally in terms of different aspects of enterprise architecture, but also dipping into more domain-specific material. So if you look through the list of series guides, and I'll give you a link to those later, you'll see that we've got material related to reference models. We've got guides that talk about how to apply TOGAF in an Agile context. We've got stuff on microservice architecture. So there's a whole range of different things that are swirling around in the standard at the moment. So, this intrinsically makes TOGAF a more complex product. Having a more defined structure around modules or components is a way of handling that. I'm sure if there are enterprise architects or any kind of architects on watching this at the moment, you'll understand what I'm on about. So let's press on. I want to talk a little bit about how we make the TOGAF standard, because some people ask, like, where does it come from? Do we have a bunch of enterprise architecture wizards in a tower somewhere stroking their beards, writing stuff down? And the answer is, of course, no. We don't have a bunch of enterprise architecture wizards, kinda. What we have is a structure in the open group where I guess members are driving the content that we create. People join the open group for various reasons, and some of those reasons relate to wanting to share experience and get involved in developing the standards. Now, all of the content that we create is created by practicing enterprise architects who have joined the open group membership. So it's intrinsically, I guess, well, not kinda. That it really means that it's based on actual practice and experience, and it's subject to a process that involves fairly extensive peer review. And the act of doing that, I guess, really, all the work that happens inside the forum happens in a collection of working groups. So members decide through discussion with myself and others that we feel that we've got something useful to say on a topic, and we form a working group of like-minded individuals, and we go through a process of figuring out what it is we want to say and writing it down. And after that, it goes through a peer review process and a ballot process. And by the time you get to the end of that, which can be quite quick or quite long, depending on how complex the topic is, what you get is a draft document that we feel is ready for publication. And then there's another review process that happens after that. And I guess I felt it was worth sharing that kind of information with you, because I do get asked sometimes, where does this stuff come from? The answer is, it comes from people like yourself, who feel that they have something that they want to share. And what we do is we make sure that what they're sharing is based on what they're actually doing. We do have another process for people to share ideas and put forward theories, and we publish those as white papers. And what happens is that when a white paper gets published, it really represents an opinion. And we publish those to really invite other people to comment on that opinion, talk about whether or not it's something they also do or would be interested in doing, and so on. And an idea can snowball from there. Not every white paper leads to a revolutionary new idea, but they're not supposed to. As long as some do. Some white papers do break through and make their way through adoption. And if we can gather evidence of that, and we can point to examples of where things are really being done in the real world, then we can start to look at pushing pushing that idea further into a guide or a standard. So, what's the big news I want you to take away from this stuff, from what I've just said? The material in the TOGAF standard is based on what people actually do. Now, that begs the question, does anybody do all of it? I've never met anyone who does all of it. And so if it's running through your mind that this represents, a lot of work to implement inside your organization, kind of not looking at it in the right way. It's a collection of guidance and best practice based on what people actually do. It's based on what a lot of people have done over quite a few years. So it's kind of accumulation of knowledge. But we don't expect everybody to do all of it. So just bear that in mind. You use the bits that are really helpful to you. So what is the TOGAF standard? I am coming to the what's new stuff, don't worry. What is the TOGAF standard? Well, it's a methodology, and what did I say about this before? The last time I did this presentation. It's a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it depends where you stand and how you view it. To most people, though, I think they would accept that it's both a methodology and a framework for enterprise architecture. So it gives you a method. You don't have to follow it, but it gives you a method. The method is not particularly heavyweight. And it's fairly intuitive, I think. And And it also gives you a framework for how to do the activities that it describes. And it gives you other frameworks as well. It gives you a framework for how to model an enterprise or classify the deliverables that enterprise architects create. It gives you quite a few tools like that. So you can, if you want to, instantiate it in your organization as the way that guides how enterprise architecture is done. Like I said, very few organizations do all of it, that I've seen anyway, but enough organizations do enough of it to represent, I think, a good example of how to do enterprise architecture. Certainly in my roles in the past, I've used a fair chunk of it, sometimes different parts at different times, but a fair chunk of it, enough for people that come into my organization having experience of TOGAF before to recognize it. And that's another thing that's really important about the TOGAF standard. So it establishes a common baseline for discussing and doing enterprise architecture, which can be extraordinarily helpful, especially if you're working in an environment where you've got lots of people coming in and out of the organization, maybe from third-party consultancies, maybe you've got a recruitment turnover in your own organization, whatever. Having a common baseline so that you can actually talk about meaningful things rather than spend the first 2 weeks of your relationship agreeing on a glossary of terms, which I have seen, is quite helpful. So a support tool for architects, I mean, it's also a good source of places to go dip into and get some advice on how to tackle a particular topic. One of the things I've seen over the years, and certainly I went through this in my career, is sooner or later you run into a conversation about governance and you have to sit down and figure out, well, if it's your first encounter, what is governance? What do people really mean? I remember that moment in my career very well. And then B, how to do it. So as an example, TOGAF's got quite a lot to say about how to do enterprise architecture governance, and I think it's pretty sound advice. Again, it's a lot of advice. You don't have to do it all, but there's enough. You should be able to pick enough out there to suit your purposes. And it's comprehensive modular. So yeah, what are those things saying? It's saying there's a lot of material, but again, we don't expect you to use it all. I hope I'm landing that point reasonably well. Good. So what are we talking about when we talk about the 10th edition? So the first thing to get in before, the first thing I'm going to tell you about what's new is what isn't new. Imagine that. That's good. That's good. The core character of the TOGAF standard isn't really any different to what it's used to. Now, I wanted to say that because I've been monitoring social media a bit since we did the launch event back in April, and I've seen a lot of interesting opinion about what the 10th edition really means and what it represents. And I've seen quite a bit of discussion about how the TOGAF, how the 10th edition is somehow changed its personality and gone agile, or gone digital or whatever. And what I want to say is, on a fundamental level, the essentials of the TOGAF standard in the 10th edition are the same as they were in 9.2. At the end of the day, the essence of the TOGAF standard is around fundamental things like making lists of things, associating them with lists of other things, and drawing diagrams that represent those associations. If you go on a training course, you'll be drilled with the idea of catalogs, matrices, and diagrams. And the reason that material is there and it's still fundamental is because at the end of the day, if you're doing enterprise architecture, well, all right, a bold statement, I don't think you can do enterprise architecture without making a list of stuff and associating it with other lists of stuff and drawing some pictures, if only for your own purposes, trying to make sense of the universe that you're living in. And hopefully to communicate your understanding of those things back to other people. Pictures are very powerful. Models are even more powerful than pictures, and precision and fidelity arises from the collection of good information. That stuff's fundamental to enterprise architecture, and it remains fundamental to the TOGAF standard. The architecture development method is still recognizable from 9.2. And a lot of the conversation is about how to properly partition the complexity in your organization into enterprise segment and capability building blocks. So, from that perspective, if you're expecting a radical change in the way that TOGAF is intended to work and be used, it's not there. It's not a radical change in terms of the fundamentals. The impactful changes really are in the way that we've reorganized the content and expanded it into by introducing or accepting series guides into the standard proper. And what that really does is open up new areas for inclusion in the standard. So there is a lot of new content, but that content builds on the material that was there in 9.2. It doesn't fundamentally transform it. It extends it. So there is material in there about doing enterprise architecture in an agile context, for example. And the reason I mentioned that is because that's one area that I saw, some misunderstanding leading to some interesting debate and commentary in social media. So it is there, and it does explain how to do TOGAF or how to use TOGAF to help you in an agile culture. And the reason I'm stressing that is because I guess a lot of people have labored under the impression that things like the ADM is a waterfall methodology, and a lot of people confuse age with agility or lack of agility or whatever. A lot of, I think, confused debate about this subject. I guess the simple fact to take away is that the essence of the TOGAF standard doesn't care whether you're working in an agile environment. It doesn't care if you're working in a waterfall environment. Although, to be honest, I really struggle to remember anywhere I've ever worked that actually is a waterfall environment. Not sure they really exist in the real world, but maybe that's just me. But the TOGAF standard doesn't really impose a style. What it says is really, if you're going to do enterprise architecture, here are a bunch of things to think about. And the things that you need to think about are themselves, in an aggregation, relatively complex concepts. Each one individually, when you break it down and compartmentalize it, is not very complex. It's the old eating the elephant analogy, I suppose. But by providing a structure that allows you to organize your thoughts, which is what the ADM really is, the architecture development method, you get to simplify what would otherwise be too many things to carry around in your head at one time. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to do all of the business architecture before you do all of the information systems architecture, and you've got to do all of that before you can do any development. It doesn't mean that at all, although I can understand sometimes why some people think it does. What it means is you've got to do all these things, so you may as well go about it in a fairly structured and organized way so that you don't trip over yourself. Certainly, that's the way I've always seen it. And so if anyone's worried that the TOGAF standard means I have to conform with a particular style of delivery, therefore it doesn't suit my environment, I would say, don't think that, because that's a misunderstanding. Use it or don't in the style that best suits you and your organization. And you'll find that the TOGAF standard is flexible enough to adapt. And the series guides give you some accelerators in how to adapt the standard to those different contexts. So if you want to know how to use it in an agile context, we've got a couple of series guides on that. Why more than one? Well, there's more than one way to look at it. If you want some guidance on how to establish an enterprise architecture team, we've got a series guide for that. If you need a reference architecture for government, we've got one of those. The point is that these things, I guess, are the point I'm trying to make. These things are accelerators that extend the standard. We hope you find them useful. Anyway, I was probably spoken enough on that one. What's the other thing? Language. If you get into some of the new language around the TOGAF standard, we talk about fundamental content and series guides. That's one of the basic ways we've structured it. And the fundamental content is supposed to change less frequently, and the series guides will change more frequently. Imagine that. It's almost like we thought about it. Right, expanded content. So 20 new series guides. And I did think about bunging a slide in that listed them all out, but really the text gets really tiny. It encourages me to read all 20 out, which is quite boring. So what I'll do instead is tell you that there are 20, and they address a range of topics. And if you want to know more, there's a link coming up and you can go and have a look. That way, at least I give the illusion of having given you some information whilst surreptitiously driving traffic towards the website. I would encourage you to go and have a look, though, because they do address quite a wide range of topics, and there are going to be more as the months press on. So it's been quite a long time between the release of 9.2 and 10th edition. What we will do going forward, though, is change the cadence of that release, and that's another reason why we've changed the structure and why it's so important. To me anyway, it is that we're going to be able to release material that is part of the standard and is potentially accreditable on a much more frequent basis than we've been able to do in previous years. It doesn't rank up there with landing a man on the moon or even a person on Mars, but it is significant as we look ahead at the future of the TOGAF standard. It's just occurred to me I might be the only self-deprecating English person on this call. I hope you understand that the cultural heritage that I am broadcasting today. I wouldn't like you to think I don't like this stuff. I do. It's good. Right. So there's a bunch of new stuff. 20 guides. I'm going to give you a link. Go follow it. Take 30 seconds, have a look at the list of publications. They're all very interesting. How do you get started? Well, either I craft some kind of torturous 3-hour presentation, which most of you sleep through, or you go and read this white paper. And this white paper actually is very good, right? That's not to say everything I've told you already is not very good. Everything I've told you is good is actually good. I like it. And this white paper is easy to read. It's quite conversational. It doesn't really presume any prior knowledge of the TOGAF standard. It's doing its best to reach out to people who are coming in completely fresh or with some prior knowledge. But it does go into, fortunately, in an appendix, which kind of implies that you don't have to read it, an appendix which goes through line by line every change that we've made in the standard, well, almost line by line. But it gives you very, very comprehensive release notes. So if you're coming in as like a TOGAF kind of uber nerd or something, and you want to know exactly what's changed, Appendix A of this document will tell you. If you also, though, want a rather more conversational overview of what the changes are and the motivation for them and why we think it's useful, this document also gives you that. So it's worth a read. And also, if you're going to write about it, have a read of this document before you do, whether you're going to write an article or you're going to write a blog or something where you want to comment on it. Have a read of this first, just so that you get off on the right foot. Because like I said, you know, TOGAF Standard 10th edition is not, you know, TOGAF's gone agile, TOGAF's gone digital, TOGAF's gone this, TOGAF's gone that. What it is TOGAF has evolved. It's retained its core character, but it's grown some new bits. I'm almost tempted to say evolution, not revolution, but the gods of presentations will probably shoot me for using such a cliche. So let's not do that. But yeah, there's more. I forgot about this at the end. There's just a thing. So there's also a digital edition that we've released. What does that mean? Well, in olden days, We used to call that, you could go to the website and read it online, but no, we've got a digital edition. But this is a big difference from the old HTML version of TOGAF that you might have used in the past. First of all, not only does it look different by dint of using a font that was invented after 1901, but it's also bringing together all of the content by clever use of a navigation pane on the left hand side, so you can see all the parts of the standard brought together, and imaginatively search is searching through all of the content, fundamental elements and the series guides. So so that's useful. And I like it. That's good. The more important to me, though, and this is the thing that I really want you to take away, is that we've built commentary feedback functionality into it. So if there's a bit of the standard you don't like, or you just want to write to me and tell me how much you love it or how badly it sucks, you can do that in the tool, in the digital edition, against a specific section of the document, and I will get that information and I will do something with it. If you're just writing to tell me that TOGAF sucks, that, you know, the list of things that I'm going to do with it are fairly short. But if you give me thoughtful, constructive feedback, or even if you spot an area that is perhaps could be better phrased or whatever, you can provide that feedback and I'll pick it up. Now, that's helpful to me because it's a conduit to practitioners. So you'll remember right back at the very beginning of my presentation, all that time ago, that I told you that members are responsible for creating the content. I'm responsible for managing it, but practitioners are the people that are supposed to use it, folks like yourselves. And I am very keen to get more feedback from people that are using it or trying to use it and doing something with that. Now, I've set myself up for a bit of a problem there because, you know, what is it they used to say on the television? I may not be able to respond personally to everything that you send, but I will look at it all because we have a process in-house that forces me to, whether I want to or not. But I invite you during the course of your experience with the TOGAF standard, if something occurs to you that you'd like to comment on, use that feature and I'll get it. And I would like that. So what have we got here? We got here, in all honesty, a slide I didn't finish. Of interest to modelers. I don't remember. I've picked up the draft version of this slide deck for something else. I wonder what's on the next slide. So, of interest to modelers. You're attending a modeling a summit hosted by a company that are responsible for one of the leading modeling tools on the planet. So I dare say some of you are interested in modeling. So what's of interest to modelers in the TOGAF standard? Well, you've got an enterprise meta model in the standard, which is an evolution from previous versions. There was a version of that in 9.2. It's been scrubbed up and improved. And so I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. We also have a guide on using the TOGAF standard with Archimate. Now, that's not part of the standard. I won't go into all the details as to the different shades of documentation that we produce and their relative status, but suffice it to say that very recently, I think a couple of months ago, we published a new guide written by Mark Langhorst and friends that talks about how talks about how to use the Archimate modeling language much more precisely with the TOGAF standard. So it addresses a lot of the ambiguities that have been the subject of some debate over previous years. Now, that guide was something that I helped review, and I really appreciated the fact that it had been written, because I want to do more with that in the future as we look ahead to where the TOGAF standard goes next. I will say no more on that subject for the moment, because as I already told you, members drive the creation of content. I merely get to manipulate things from the background and hope that they pan out in the way that I hope. So looking ahead, as well as mentioning that stuff about Archimate, we got more TOGAF series guides in development. We are, and as well as that, we're producing more supporting content. So not everything that we publish needs to be part of the standard. We can produce supporting guides that expand and give more help and blah, 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 in a way that we hope is useful without formally incorporating it into the standard. So we'll be hoping to publish. I'm currently going through a review process on on one today, but there'll be more material coming out in the near future. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be looking to do more frequent updates of the TOGAF standard without having to do a major release and without having to wait 3, 4, 5 years. And we saw a little hint of that, more innovative ways to access and adapt the content. Now, I gave you the stuff I showed you earlier on that slide about the digital edition. That's really just the beginning of just trying to overhaul a static presentation of the material. What we've done around modularization and the fact that we've had to expand, that we've had to deal with expanded content has forced us to think quite hard about how we can reconfigure the presentation of that material in ways that meet contextual demands. I've gone into corporate speak for a minute, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to think this through properly without giving too much away. So yeah, we're looking at more innovative ways to access and adapt the content to contextual needs of practicing enterprise architects. And I won't expand on that at the moment because there'd be too much information. But really, I guess what we've done with the 10th edition is set things up for more creative releases as we go forward, rather than releasing a great big giant book or PDF that people have to download and wade through. What this is really is the first chapter in being able to make the content much more accessible and easy to digest. We're chunking up the elephant. I wish I'd thought of that before. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're chunking up the elephant. I think that's pretty much my last slide, and I took slightly longer on that than I was expecting. But that's all I've got to say for now. I'll be very happy to answer any questions that may have come up in the meantime. But won't be offended if there are none.
Well, no worries on that, Scott Mark. There have been plenty. So first of all, thank you very much for that presentation. Well, not just an interesting topic, of course it is, but it's really important to an awful lot of people as well. So, and before the session began, we were sort of wondering about the questions, and I think you were suggesting a lot would come in about certification. So I know you did talk on this a little bit, but maybe just to answer some of those earliest questions, really just to maybe reiterate. So questions about whether people should recertify. The first question was somebody that's on level 1, 9.2 and planning for level 2, what's their best approach? I want to put words in your mouth, but I guess the question is asking, should they wait and do it all on level 10?
Right, so a disclaimer, first of all. Certification is a different department, and I have no official news for you on that, other than some news or all news will be released very soon. So you'll get the official line very soon on TOGAF 10th edition certification. What I can tell you is if you look backwards to what happened when 9.2 came out, as to how the open group handled this this question, you'll see that fairly consistently what the open group has done is offered bridge exams or to take you from a previous release to a new release. And what I know for sure is that the open group are really mindful of the expense that people have already gone to become, or to either become certified in 9.2 already, or those people that are in process of becoming certified for 9.2. And the mantra that I know happens inside the company is that no practitioner gets left behind. So nobody certified gets left behind, and nobody gets abandoned. So what I am aware of slightly more detail than that, but I'm not authorized to tell you what it is. But what I would encourage you to do is look at the history and learn from that. And be assured that the open group does not intend to leave any practitioner behind.
Excellent. Okay, well, they're good pointers. So thanks for that, Mark. Okay, so we'll go on to some other questions that are sort of drilling down into, or wanting to anyway, in terms of the standard itself. Is there a maturity model for which areas are important to focus on first, and which areas should be next?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like Norris McWhirter now. There's a reference from the 70s for anyone hanging old enough to remember it.
Yep,
so yes, but don't press me on it because I can't remember what it is. But I'm pretty sure that there is a maturity model included with the 10th edition. It might be the same one that was in 9.2. I don't remember. It's the kind of thing that I would Google. It's not a very helpful answer, is it? But I just for the benefit of everybody, right? I work on TOGAF quite a lot, and I'm very invested in it. And I mentioned quite a few times through my presentation that nobody expects you to read it all. I certainly don't remember all of it. It's a reference work. So ask me something. What my elephantine memory really is best tested by questions about the discography of Led Zeppelin or something. I don't remember everything.
Well, that would be a good discussion for another session, I think. But and it's a pity you've not had your video on. It was very intriguing seeing all the musical instruments you had behind you there earlier, Mark.
I am nothing if not a frustrated rock star. Anyway, carry on.
Okay, but staying with this now. Okay, a question here. This one came in just a moment ago. I've seen the addition of the business information type in the TOGAF 10 meta model. Can you explain what this is used for?
Oh, goodness me. No, it's my short answer, but the TOGAF standard can.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This is an interesting set of questions for me, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like I should know well, obviously there's an expectation that I'll know stuff like that, but carry on.
Okay, well, I mean, if I'm honest, I was trying to find one that would be sort of like a step towards what I thought might be some of the harder ones that we got here, because a few questions relate to maybe comparisons between TOGAF and other standards, or linkages perhaps between them. For instance, Matt asked, in relation to business architecture within TOGAF, are you able to indicate the extent of alignment to the Business Architecture Guild's business architecture body of knowledge?
Yes. Yeah, I can answer that one.
Cool.
That's a more structural question. That's good. That's a question about the architecture of TOGAF rather than a line of code. I don't do detail very well. Sorry if that's disappointing for folks, but I just don't. So the folks who have been working on the business architecture volumes that are part of the standard. So we've done 5 series guides with the 10th edition. Several of the people that have been involved in that working group are also part of the Business Architecture Guild. And there is quite close correlation in concepts and content. It doesn't mean it's exactly the same, but it's consistent. I can be confident. We can be confident of that.
Cool. Excellent. Okay. And on a similar vein, can you speak to how using TOGAF's Agile architecture compares with open Agile architecture?
Yes, I can do that as well. I had some experience of working on the first release of the OAA material as well. So I'll give you my opinion, all right? And it's not the only opinion in the world, but I'll give you my opinion. The OAA material comes at the topic from a slightly different perspective. First of all, its main goal is to provide guidance to enterprise architects who are involved in digital transformation activities inside an organization. And it's intended to help those people understand the culture shift that is required from I don't know what you would call it. I don't know. You've just generally the past. I don't know, whatever we used to do before digital transformation. I don't know. And because of that, its focus is really on the dual transformation that they see as being required. So the authors assert that you can't transform into a digital organization without either first or simultaneously transferring into an agile culture. Now, that doesn't mean agile in a small team sense. It's agile at scale. And what it really is doing is trying to shift the perception of the reader and therefore the practitioner from putting variously the enterprise or the architecture at the center of focus, and shifting the concept of product to the center of focus. Now, what it doesn't do, and it doesn't do this quite deliberately, is explain how to do the fundamentals of enterprise architecture. It doesn't really talk about what artifacts you need to create or what lists you need to. It doesn't talk about any of that. It presumes that you're already an enterprise architect, and what you're trying to do is become a different kind of enterprise architect. So if I can say this without, I mean, it's going to sound disparaging, but it's not. It's more about style than substance. It's about how you do enterprise architecture in a given context rather than the fundamentals of what you do. So there's a lot more, style and motivation discussion going on in that document. But the bottom line is, it assumes you already know what you're doing in terms of the fundamentals of enterprise architecture. So it's a more advanced piece of work. TOGAF, on the other hand, in its fundamental form, presumes no style, presumes no context, and presumes that you don't know how to do enterprise architecture, and you're trying to come to terms, with the activities that are involved in that. The series guides attempt then to put more context around it and introduce perhaps more stylistic discussion. But at its heart, TOGAF assumes nothing, and the OAA assumes quite a lot of things. Both are good, and both have their contents rooted in real world experience, but they are coming at the same problem from very different places.
Indeed. And we had another question actually even earlier on, but very comparable with this one, about, again, how TOGAF is maybe complementing, or other frameworks are able to complement TOGAF. So does the series guides relate to other methods in terms of how TOGAF complements SABSA, for instance, for cybersecurity, or SAFE for agile architecture?
Right. So we've just released a security guide with like a TOGAF series guide on zero trust architecture, but I'm not a security. So the reason I say to people in moments like this, I can't answer that question, is because I'm not sure I can give you a correct answer. I could probably make one up, and you'd probably be convinced by it because I've got enough experience of flim-flamming over the years. But I don't know I don't know enough about security architecture to give you a good answer on that one. What I can tell you is, in terms of a correlation with other frameworks, what the Open Group will do is talk about how to use different standards from the Open Group together. For various reasons, not least of which are things like ownership and copyright. We don't tend to write material that talks about how to use Open Group standards in combination with non-Open Group frameworks or stuff like that. Now, which is why there's no how to use TOGAF with SAFE, for example. But there is how to use TOGAF with IT for IT. And there is how to use TOGAF with DPBOK, for example, the Digital Practitioner's Body of Knowledge. And so I guess in summary, my answer is yes and no. So yes, with some constraints on the range of frameworks and standards that we're able to talk about.
Excellent. Okay. There are so many other questions that we have here, but I'm afraid I think we have to pause there. Mark,
I would like to quickly answer one question that came up in the chat, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
From Mark Shelton. Is the digital edition of the TOGAF standard free to access? Yes, it is. All of the TOGAF materials are free, and you can either download or use online. There are some qualifiers on the use of TOGAF, but you can read all about those on the website if you're really keen to read license agreements, like everyone does.